in existence any longer. But that's life.
Yeah. Do you remember that beautiful, huge model they had in their reception of the arches?
Yes.
Phenomenal model.
Right.
Sculpture. I wonder where it is.
They kept it. They kept it, and probably they will do something.
Is that Danny?
No. Hi, Bruce.
Wow. Was it Enrique? Welcome, Enrique. Mitz Canada. Oh, midnight in Tokyo. Wow. I got some celebrities. Diego, welcome.
You've got Rebecca with me.
Hi, Rebecca.
And you've got Catherine with Richard. Which
hello, Catherine.
That's my other daughter.
So I'm gonna get started in a minute. And what I'd like to do is try to present. I'm gonna try and time myself and try and keep my presentation to somewhere between 30 to 40 minutes, hopefully 30 minutes. And then I want to try and facilitate the conversation. So if everyone can use the chat box as well, and then we can have a conversation. I think what's so fascinating for me in this experience is I met Dan last week, and he asked me if I'd want to give a presentation, and he said, "How about next Monday?" And we sort of decided on the timing on Friday. And so I sent out this invitation to you all, and Dan as well sent invitations. And I think we're sort of forced into this new world. It's really amazing. Like, try and imagine in the past giving a presentation, getting on a plane, all of the time it takes to all the traveling, the hotels, and then you get up and you speak for an hour and you go to dinner or whatever. It's like, it's potentially so much easier for us to share our ideas and maybe share a meal together on Zoom. That's good, Enrique.
Perfect.
All right, Dan, do you think it's good to get started now? Oh, don't go offline, Enrique.
Well, Bruce, if you are so kind, perhaps we can chat a little bit more because some of the people I invited are less punctual. They are not Swiss, so if we can wait for 4 or 5 more minutes, it would be fine. We already have about 50 people, so there is a certain number of people that are waiting for your presentation. But if you are eager to start, we can do it, of course.
All right, well, I'll wait a couple more minutes. Just
yes, thank you.
Say hi to some people. I think my mom's on. Maybe you could do the video if you have it, Mom. Say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, Mother.
Oh.
Hello.
Oh my God,
Eric Stovner, Critical Structures. Hey, Eric, do you have a camera? Can we see you? Hey, Stovner. Eric and I went to school together. We've known each other forever. Eric's had such a great career with Leslie Robinson, Lyra in New York, Silman, Thornton Tomasetti, and now Critical Structures. Awesome to see you, Eric. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Bruce.
Scrolling through, and we've got Danny joining from Jerusalem. Is that right, Danny? I think you're on mute.
Bruce, this is Craig Huntington here. You see my name up there. It's my wife's name, Robin Huntington.
Oh, hey, Craig. Thanks for joining.
You bet. Looking forward to it.
Wow, we've really got some. Hi, David. David Abel. Craig, we really got some high-powered, lightweight structures designers on the call.
And I see Mike Eschler there under his wife's name.
Oh, hey, Mike.
Thanks for the invite. Yes, like Craig, I'm under my wife's name.
Our wives manage Zoom, apparently. I heard Dave Campbell, but I don't see him on the screen. I heard the name Dave Campbell.
I saw his name.
He's disappeared, huh?
Hi, Bruce. This is James Bowen. I also have a wife
Oh,
name.
James, you're in one of the pictures in my presentation. You have to find yourself, okay?
Fantastic. I'm Lisa DiCavolo this morning.
Is that Magdalena? Magda?
Lisa DiCavolo.
I see Madeline, Magdalena? Oh, you're on mute and can't see your camera. Vernon, how you doing?
Doing good. Just keeping busy.
Yeah. Well, but I love to see what you're up to, what you're building.
לא, אני שומע, ואתם לא שומעים.
There we go. Hey, Danny. Thanks for joining. Edmund?
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, because I put the headphones, but we have two people here, Ariel and Anton. We're working on the Museum of Tolerance, as you know, in Jerusalem.
Sure, we got to build that fabric structure, right?
Yes. And
that fabric mesh.
Yeah, I will take it out so they can hear you. I will disconnect the mic because it's together with the headphones, so we can hear you and to enjoy your speech.
Great, and use the chat. Edmund, thanks for joining us. Ed from Cal Poly.
Yeah.
Ed's doing some amazing work with graphic statics and teaching. Thanks for that course, Ed. Shell structures too.
אתה שומע? לא. אז אני מוציא.
Dan, how about if we get started now?
Sure. Let me give you the right to use the. Okay, so let me see. Make host. Okay. Do you want to make the host to Bruce Danziger? Yes. So from now on, you should be able to show what you intend to present.
Okay, so I am going to share screen 2. I'm going to. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to turn on my timer as well. Can you see me as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Okay, here we go. So this is Dan. Thanks for asking me to speak and share some ideas. And this is taken from a paper I wrote for the IASS. That's the International Association of Shells and Spatial Structures, founded by Toroja, I think back in the 50s or 60s. And in 2018, they had a conference. They have an annual conference in 2018. Was at MIT. And it was on creativity and structural engineering. So I wanted to gather my thoughts and deliver them in 2018. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity, Dan, to recollect those thoughts 2 years later and try to come up with some new ideas relative to that. And so I'm going to tell a few stories about some projects that I worked on 20 to 30 years ago. I picked 3 projects that were really influential in my career, and that's Pavilion of the Future in Seville, Spain for the Expo, the Sony Center roof in Berlin, and the Taichung Botanical Gardens Rainforest Greenhouse in Taiwan. and then I want to talk a little bit about teaching as well to architecture and engineering students on the creative side. Let me just preface this as, I've just been very, very fortunate in my career, and by no means am I the author of any of these buildings. And I've just been very fortunate to participate, and with fortunate to be part of Arup and all of the wonderful collaborations I've had with engineers and architects over the years. And so just being able to contribute and be part of the genius that others bring to this work has just been my great joy, pride. Talk a little bit about influences. Peter Rice was my first boss there in London, so he's been a huge, huge influence on me. And I just try to recreate kind of a sliver, a little chip of his genius in my work. I'm forever striving to bring that human side of structural engineering to the work. Pierluigi Nervi was and still is a huge influence to me, and his ideas of aesthetics, elegance, and efficiency and economy. And it was really important to me as I was a student, as well as Eduardo Torroja, this beautiful book, Philosophy of Structure. Eric and I were just talking about this book. Gosh, was it yesterday, Eric? It was like a long time ago. And then the Institute of Lightweight Structures publications that are amazing, with architects, engineers, biologists getting together and producing these publications. The IL-25 on experiments is just a beautiful, beautiful book. If I was to suggest one book, it would be, for a gold mine of potential, or just treasure of ideas of potential structural investigations. I'm not seeing the chat, so if anybody wants to just chime in, please feel free. So when I was putting this together back in 2018, I was doing some investigation on creativity and history and psychology of creativity. And one of the things that I was finding really interesting is that creative people tend to have, they have some foibles, to put it lightly. So, psychology in the sort of 18th, 19th century was pretty much, in psychiatry, was dominated by studying mental illness. And it's only recently that psychologists are looking towards, happier side of life and how to help people prosper and really create a good life rather than treating illnesses. And I wanted just to bring up that point that I think it's fundamental to this talk. Somebody needs to mute. So it's fundamental to this talk is that as structural engineers, I think we can do a lot more investigation and creativity particular to our craft. Well, the philosophy of mind and body is really important to me, and that our mind just doesn't reside in our brain, between our eyes, but it's also in our hands, and it's embodied and outside of our, even outside of our physical body. There's a lot of interesting literature on this. Here's a quote. It's through touch that we're able to interact directly with the world. Do you see yourself, James? Sort of middle, bottom right, with Ben and Gaston.
Looking a lot better in those days.
No, you look sweet. And these are some images from courses that I taught at SCIARC, Southern California Institute of Architecture, and at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic, where with engineering and architecture students, we do a lot of sketching, we make a lot of physical models, and then we interact with them and see what they want to tell us, what sort of secrets they want to give up. And it is a lot about embodied mind. So like I was saying earlier in the Peter Rice book, so I was very fortunate to join Arup in the late 1980s and work under Peter Rice for a few years. And he created some great opportunities for me. And I wanted to speak a little bit about his genius. And there's a beautiful film called An Engineer Imagines, which you can now, I think, get on Amazon Prime. And there's also a film that Arup produced around an exhibition called Traces of Peter Rice. I'd encourage you all to see those if you haven't seen them. These are just a few of Peter's projects: the Sydney Opera House, the Pompidou Center in Paris, the Museum of Science and Industry at La Villette in Paris as well, the glass boxes, and Lloyd's of London. And I could give at least another hour talk on Peter's genius. But I think relevant to this, and it's going to come out more in the talk, is Peter's delight in doing something new, not starting projects with preconceived notions, feeling very comfortable with a blank piece of paper or no ideas, and letting the project kind of fester for a while and come up with some ideas, just having the courage to get started when you really don't know what to do, and that's okay. And also the delight in the delight in being able to do something that's never been done before and couldn't have been done yesterday. And that's very much evident in some of these projects, like the castings at the Pompidou Center, the structural glass walls at La Villette, suspending the glass with the if you can see my mouth, the rotule connection. So the first project I want to talk about, the first of three, is the Pavilion of the Future in Seville. This was my first very big project that I worked on as a junior engineer. And the wonderful thing about this project is, and some of these images are during construction because there's 11 arches and 12 columns, and we're partway through there. There's only 8 arches there in this image, this sunset image. So what you want to see here is this is structural granite, so it's structural stone. There's no pre-stressing. The stability is provided by a steel lattice of poke-through struts that have diagonal ties. I'll explain that a little bit more. These beautiful sketches from MBM. And Shame, do you know who did these sketches? Was this Oriel or David or was it Jose who did these sketches? There's these beautiful stories of Peter Rice. Is that Shame?
Yes. No, I would think it's Oriel's sketch.
Yeah, I do. I think it's Oriel Bohigas' sketches. So there's these beautiful stories of Peter traveling to Barcelona and working with the architects and asking for some pictures of Gothic cloister masonry construction in Seville, and coming up with this idea based on some ideas he had from the Palacio de Ajuda in Lisbon, where he'd seen this I think it's 17th century palace where the walls were constructed but weren't finished. I think the was decided to go off and go to war or something like that instead of complete his palace, or had to, whatever. So, but this wall had withstood major earthquakes and was standing. Maybe we can build a building off of it. Just checking my time. If I'm not careful, I'll tell too many stories. All these buildings have so many stories to tell. So initially, the idea was to prop a roof with 2 stone walls. And the conundrum was the project could only afford 1 stone wall. So I was quite fortunate as a young engineer that Peter Rice and Tristram Carfrey gave me a week to think about it and come up with ideas. And the idea I came up with was to replace the second wall with a steel lattice that's braced in elevation. And then in section, it has these poke-through struts that diagonally tie. But you can think of the building. Hey, Rick Battaglia, great to see you, Rick. Sorry. So you can see in elevation that it's very easy to explain in elevation. The complex three-dimensional system is that if you push along the longitudinal elevation of the wall, you just get these diagonal ties working in tension. And if you push in and out in section, you get these diagonal ties. So it's essentially cross-braced three-dimensionally, but you can think of it two-dimensionally. Initially, the architect took our idea, and we weren't really clear what side we wanted the steel on, and they drew the section with the steel on the outside. And the idea was that this wall was going to create like a gateway to the city, because there's a park in the city of Seville. This is on the island. And so just like the Feria has these beautiful gates, so we had to convince them, or just ask them to please rotate it around, because we felt very strongly that the stone should be on the outside and the steel should be between the buildings. So the stone should face the park. Here's some sketches and analysis that I did. Back then in the day, we had to wait till everyone left the office, and we put a cardboard hood around the computer and shot a bunch of slide photos of the images on the computer at different shutter speeds and aperture, and like 10 of each, and then one of them would be good for each one. You can see the dust and stuff in the lens, but this is the basic diagram. You pull down on a funicular pattern of ties to use steel for tension, and it compresses the stone. So that's blue in the arch and red in the column. I'll try not to get too technical here. The columns are pin-ended stone elements because they're braced, so they're fully stable. They don't need to be moment connected. They can be pins between the joints, but the arches need to be continuous and transfer bending through the joints. And that's this idea of understanding stability of arches and creating analogies using lightweight geometric nonlinear structural analysis programs to allow joints to open and close. And one key point I want to make here is I tried to make just 5 load cases. I know it's 6, but really it's 5. I try to understand the structure with 5 load cases. Try to set that limit. In the end, you can add more load cases, but modern day computation, you see engineers starting off and pressing buttons and ending up with 500 load cases and not really understanding the behavior and which one's governed. And you can see from this image here how that's working, how the column's bracing the structure, how the stone is in compression. Here's a picture of me and Peter and Ignacio, who was the stonemason, some of the units in the shop. These are some of my sketches trying to figure out this springing unit. This is the unit, this is the area that gave us the most trouble analytically, and was quite a difficult piece to build. This is a different stone, but you get a sense of the scale of the structure. This is just the springing stone, so it's just the stone that it's just right here. How you analyze that? Let's see. I'm going to have to speed up a little bit. One of the things that was really important to me was the base stone and how you encountered the building. And I was studying classic architecture. People were laughing at me because I was trying to figure out how to do this base stone. And thanks, Rick. Yeah, they were making jokes about me, and I was trying to be an architect, but I was trying to give it like a pedestal or a capital and try to make it hollow so that people could relate to it. But in the end, they said, thanks, Bruce. We'll just keep it solid because it's so dangerous that a truck or something, so it needs to be very robust at the base. So we'll just have a solid piece of stone. Thank you very much. So that's what we ended up using. And this giant clamp, big chunk of stone, put it on its base, and off you go. Another story to tell was how we braced the arch. Initially, we had this pattern, and we looked at so many different patterns of ties. And Alistair Lenchner, I don't know if you're on the call, but he came up with this genius idea of making the last funicular radial tie a strut, so that, and this is called the out of balance strut, so that if the downward load from the roof is not in balance, the unbalanced load will make its way evenly with an even tension throughout the whole arch, loading the arch. And any unbalanced load will push on the strut and then pull and wrap itself around here instead of bending the arch. Sorry if I'm getting a little too technical there. Hey, Pierre, good morning. Beautiful to see you. So building it was the real challenge, and the builder insisted on building the capitals flat, which was the most susceptible point when you rotated it from its table, and then tried to lift it because it didn't benefit from its self-weight. Stone was likely to crack, and sure enough, we cracked the first units until we stiffened the jig, and we didn't clamp across joints. But this is another story I want to tell. I'll try and tell this pretty quickly. But initially, the idea was they build the columns flat and tilt them up. And I was so concerned about that I said I offered another solution, just building stable units. And then ultimately, that's what we did. The contractor wanted to do this big, insisted to do this big scaffolding on tracks. But we told him it would be very hard to control the dimensions and it would take too long. They built it anyways, and then ended up abandoning it because they couldn't get the tolerances up here. So then we built these jigs. Alistair came up with another brilliant idea of sliding joint and a temporary joint. So when you lifted it, we could control where all the displacement took place. So these are, just some of the images of building it. These are a couple of Peter's original sketches. The architects joked that he couldn't sketch, but hey, these are pretty decent sketches for an engineer. Give them more credit. This is the, example of building one of the capitals when it was rocking. That's me right there. I wouldn't let them tilt it further until I went through and I checked every piece of stone to make sure it didn't crack. That was just, and you can see we evolved to, we just clamp across the pieces, and we never clamp or try not to clamp across a joint. So when it rocks, all the displacement is controlled at the joints. Another story here, and this is about creativity and incubation, I think, is every other column has a stair interrupting the bracing. And to match the stiffness of the fully braced column with the portal frame that allowed the stair to pass through. And we initially had castellated moment frames with lozenge, elongated circle castellations that you typically see in a castellated beam or a beam with holes in the web. And I had this vivid dream out in the square in London, in Fitzroy Square, with the chairman at his desk in the center of the square. And I went up to his desk, and he told me that the castellations should be diamonds. And I got up the next morning and I went into the office and I told Alistair and Peter that the castellations must be diamonds. And I think they laughed at me and they said, fine, draw it, diamonds it is. The next project I want to talk about is the Sony Center in Berlin. This is a project I worked on while I was in New York with Murphy Yawn Architects, based in Chicago, Helmut Yawn. This is really an amazing project. I just want to focus on the roof. It's 102 meters long by 86 meters wide. It floats on top of these buildings. The first story I want to tell here is about geometry. So what we did is we designed one fabric strip, and it's basically a surface of revolution with 10 degrees of fabric, 5 degrees of glass, 10 degrees of fabric, form. And then we were trying to figure out how can we get the whole basis of the idea is a circle, an offset circle in an elliptical or ellipse-like plan for the plaza. And we tried to find that mathematically. And in the end, we just came up with this idea of extruding it like a cookie cutter. So we take one typical strip, the longest one was 60 meters. We spin it about an axis of revolution. We tilt it, and then we extrude it and slice it. And then by trial and error, I just kept moving the slice back and forth until it kissed in the back. So you get this ring kissing, just kind of move it around till we get that kiss. So every one of these fabric pieces is the same, they're just cut a little bit short. And all the glass is the same as you go around. So it has this surface of revolution regularity, but through these geometric operations has a very dynamic form that you don't see this underlying regularity. So the second story I want to tell is about the tension ring beam, and this is during construction with the flying strut supporting a crane and scaffolding along the central tension ring. And so look, these are a lot of my original sketches, just looking at the ridge and valley as a cable truss with the fabric between the truss in this pleated form becoming the web of the truss, and pulling up the ridges and pulling horizontally at the valleys. And initially all the valleys connected into the central strut. That was the scheme. But in building the strip, building up the engineering analysis, something like 2 in the morning, I noticed that just in stages of building up the model, that I didn't need to connect that lower valley cable to the central strut. I could just keep it as a tension ring. I think that's one of the really wonderful things about the project is the strut kind of shoots through, picks up the ridges, but the valleys just go to a cable strut. Another thing I felt really strongly about was the form of the central strut, and that the form should be about vertical force. We worked with the architects on whether the rings in the strut or the vertical elements should be the stronger design elements. One of the things that I tried to push for is getting more into the design of this node. I felt like this node was like the knuckle of the project, for lack of, I could say another term, it's like it's the key element of the project is this point. It's like the focal point. And I think unfortunately it just ended up with an engineering solution. I was trying to argue that they should sort of spiral around and they should be in different balances and that we should really get the balance of this right. But I don't think we really got there. I think it's a little bit of a shame. Just some of the sketches and ideas of getting it up and running. The next story I want to talk about is the challenge we had when we put the whole model together. So we've got the tensile ring beam. We had these few points coming from the flying strut out to the ring beam. And what they were doing is they were dog boning the ring beam, which is typical when a ring is in a circle and it's not funicularly loaded or equally radially loaded. They tend to pull it in and push it out like a dog bone and sees a lot of bending moment. And so the idea I came up with here was to break it up into branches. So as the vector comes out, split it up into multiple points. And it worked brilliant for the analysis, but as you can see, the scale of these fork ends and these ears, these pins, they're huge and they're really heavy. And these were really difficult to build and get these points in space to be where they need to be because they were so darn heavy. Here you can see some images. You see this bottom point. You see the strut flying through the cable ring. You can see the trifurcation of this cable as it comes out, hits this node, and then splits out to spread that load to try to limit some of the dog boning of the ring beam. The next project I want to talk about is the Taichung tropical rainforest greenhouse, Taiwan, with HOH and Brian Irwin and Ian Tyndall. I had a much more active role here in the design and form of the columns, and it's in my opinion, it's super sculptural for a structural engineer. And there's little bits that aren't really doing anything, but because I was authoring the project, I could put them in. Here's some recent images that a friend of mine took that visited the project. The idea is that this thing won't look so much like a spaceship that's or some sort of meteor that's hit the planet. As the trees grow, you more encounter this sort of fantastic sculptural form. And there's these amazing experiences inside the rainforest greenhouse as well. Here's my computer model showing the 6 towers. So it's a hyperboloid roof. Half of the hyperboloid is suspended up to a conical collar with a spherical, like a skull cap dome that sits on top on 6 portal frames that are aligned with the towers and some hangars. These are some of my initial sketches. And I like to tell the story of how I came up with the form of the column. That if you just look at the optimum form for a column, it's kind of a torpedo shape that's wider in the center to resist buckling. And if you look at the form to resist lateral load, it's sort of a bent A-frame. And if you combine the two and you rub your eyes a bit, maybe you get this sort of leaf-like sculptural form for a greenhouse for a tropical rainforest. And just some more sketches and images of how I arrived at these forms. They're not beautiful sketches. They're more about ideas. Just some images of how the glass is supported. There's these clear bands. It's tiled, so there's no connectivity between the rings. The rings are slotted at these sort of trident intersections. Again, it's sort of a lot of poetic license with the form here. What I was trying to evoke here was a Victorian aesthetic, kind of Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And the idea is that you get these 6 towers supporting these rings with the intermediate part of the ring suspended to the towers. Here's the portal frames. Those are my dogs in the background, supporting the central dome. I wanted to use lenticular column forms because of the radial orientations of the 6 towers. I didn't want to use pipes. I barely held on to this when it went out to bid and the prices were coming out very high. But a Chinese steel company based in Kaohsiung in Taiwan stepped up and said they could do it. So we got the lenticular forms. And then you can see where this is in the shop, putting it together. I wanted them to curve it as well. And I was convinced that it could be segmented and it would still appear curved, because imagine bending this, welding it, and then trying to curve it again. Basically impossible, right? But then here's the casting. I want to tell a story about, there's a lot of castings here. And what I asked the casters to, and this is a 350 millimeter deep lenticular section and a 500 millimeter deep lenticular section, joining together an intersection. And I asked them to smooth this out and make it somewhat hyperbolic between the castings. And they said, sure, we understand you. How can we do that? And so what I asked them to do is I approved the shop drawings technically for the metallurgy and the sections for doing this. And they made some small models out of railroad board. And then they added modeling clay. And they sent me pictures of those models. I was based in New York at the time. And I said, these are great, just add a little bit more clay, please. And good to go. And you can see here some of the molding of these forms. The last story I want to tell about this one, hopefully the last story, is I asked them to paint it 3 different colors. And the contractor screamed foul. You know, like, no way. I think he used, you know, I think he said, no way in hell am I going to paint this 3 different colors. And so I wrote a paper because the client asked me to justify 3 different colors. So I wrote a paper on it and I sent it to him. So the client said, yes, please paint it 3 colors. And what I wanted was this oxblood red, and they chose something a little bit too cherry red, but I wanted oxblood red to describe the load path. So that's the tension ties and the arms and all the castings that form the splices and the 3-dimensional elements that provide additional support along the 6 arms. Dark blue for all of the pipes and light blue for all of the plate. And then where there's pin connections, you can kind of see this, where there's pin castings, I sketched for them the transition between the dark blue and the light blue. There's kind of these paraboloid transitions. I really like this image where you can see it's spring-loaded at the base in these kind of tree forms. You can see the castings of the way the arms come about, and there's sort of these half-ellipsoid forms that are cast in steel, and the way these castings at the base come together in these pin connections. This is the shop drawing of the casting without the hyperbolic, without the hyperbolic transitions that were added with modeling clay. But they show them the metallurgy of these castings where these arms come together. And these are the frilly bits. And I've been accused of this being really kitsch, this design, or, you know, that's what happens when you let an engineer go wild. Engineers gone wild, and you let them design. But I think the sign of how well they keep this up, how often they paint it and clean it, is a sign of the pride and how much they enjoy this structure. So maybe it's a little bit, you know, pardon the you know, we can all think of other designers, like, you know, that maybe get a little carried away with their projects, but and architecturally we poo-poo it and say we don't like it. But, you know, maybe people really do want some stuff that's a little bit more creative, sculptural, imaginative, and has a signature at the risk of not being so architecturally true. You know, some images of encountering the greenhouse and some lighting at night. I like this image a lot. That I think it captures some of the sense I was trying to get. You know, the structure is kind of heavy in the end, but sometimes a certain level of gravitas, especially for parts that are being suspended, add to the effect of suspension. And maybe that's true for other buildings. Some of the engineers on the line, you know, can relate to, where things that are suspended, if they're kind of heavy, they add to that sense of suspension. I think here you start to see some of the color coding. You see it here as well. You see the red tie and the red hangers and the red cast connectors, splices. So I want to wrap up the talk. I don't want to just end on my 3rd project. I want to talk a little bit about some thoughts I have, you know, design thinking, how we model things. I think engineers tend to model a little bit too much now on the computer too soon. I just wanted to share these quotes. All models are wrong, but some are useful. All models are wrong, and increasingly you can succeed without them. And, you know, this kind of thing of garbage in, garbage out is not just about the calculations. It's also about the design. And if you let the computer take over, you know, it might be interesting and fantastic, but doesn't really mean it's great. You know, in other words, it can be smart without being wise. I'll talk a little bit about the evolving role of the structural engineer, and the discussion of, you know, the recent shift of, you know, 20, 30 years ago, where engineers were, you know, going from being calculators to communicators, and this kind of shifting role of interpreting, understanding, and communicating. And with artificial intelligence, machine learning, are we getting pushed out of our role of interpreting and understanding and communicating? And if so, what are we doing and what are we going to do? And I want to suggest, at least from my point of view, that this embodied mind is very important for the architectural or artistic side of structural engineering and structural design. Sorry about the long quote here, but I wanted to just share with you these current thoughts I have. I've been really interested in this hedgehog and or fox, which is comes up a lot in macroeconomics, philosophy, and global leadership and politics. And we can all think of a few hedgehogs now that sort of one big idea. And I think the analogy is hedgehogs, when being attacked, roll into a defensive ball, whereas foxes rely on their cunning and assess the situation to do something unique for any given situation. And respond to that. I just wanted to share this quote on grand strategy. And I think you can all read this, but I think for engineers, it's not just the engineering, or I was asked if it's going to be a very technical talk, and it really wasn't. But it includes not just theory, observation, and rigorous calculation, but also narrative, analogy, paradox, irony, intuition, imagination, and not least in importance, style. And I think when I go back to Peter Rice, and it's very much, there's a lot of this imagination and his particular style that goes in his work. And I think you can say the same of Calatrava and Candela, Doroja, and some of the great engineers that are practicing now, like Schleich and quite a few others, Geiger, and others that are on the call. And just not just teaching, because architecture students, they get it. You don't have to explain this to them. But what about engineering students? And what about engineers at large? Do they understand precedents? Do they have are they comfortable with exploring things that they don't readily grasp or understand, and letting their intuition and their senses guide the process? So I wanted to lead you with that. I included Dan's image from Corbu that went on the invite, and I wanted to, with our remaining time, is maybe try to generate a discussion. So I think for me, if I stop presenting, I can see the chat and allow people to interact. So how do I do that? How do I unpresent? So and one of the things we can talk about is just being able to get everybody together globally. I've got people from all over the place on this call. I think there's something I wanted to mention about inclusivity, diversity, and creative types in structural engineering. I think sometimes these people get shut out because the more dominant, maybe commercial or conservative sides of the profession don't allow the conservatives to either ever come, grow into the profession or have a voice.
Bruce, if you want, you can please exit share screen, and then we could see the speaker.
How do I do that? How do I exit share screen?
Yeah, there is someone more knowledgeable than me. There is a button where you click on stop sharing or exit share, something like this.
I'm not sure. I think it's on a bottom where you usually have to share screen. Maybe there's the stop sharing. So if you go down with the mouse, it probably pops in.
In the middle.
Yeah.
Hover with the mouse over the bottom, and you should get a dialog box, and it should give you the option.
All right, I'll keep sharing it, but I want to thank Dan again for this opportunity because I think for me it sort of reinvigorated myself. I hope I'm not just having another midlife crisis, but I think I'm trying to find these opportunities. They're less so now than they used to be. Being offered opportunities to have a blank piece of paper and come up with ideas, and maybe I get more of these opportunities than I know, but I just don't have the time or the space to allow for them.
Bruce, it's Jim.
Hey, Jim.
I'd just like to say that my part in the Palace of the Future in Seville was, of course, when Peter came back from the talking to the client, and he had been told, if you want to get this built, you've got to tell him how to do it. And you came to me and said, what about it? So I produced a scheme based on building the thing at ground level as far as possible, and then in such large components as you could, and lifting it into the air. And we made a model of part of the process, if you remember. And the eventual contractor followed that model slavishly, but he then decided to try and build the arches with a big constructional tower between them. And as you showed in your presentation, it didn't work. And eventually he came round to our way of thinking, my way of thinking. And then after that meeting we had at site, we came home to my retirement party. And I thought that was a very satisfactory way to finish my career.
Great.
Cheers.
That's good.
Congratulations. Yeah.
And Johnny, do you want to say anything about
Yes, first of all, I have to, I just realized that I had been in Berlin, and I admire the Sony cupola. I had been in Taichung, but at the time, I'm afraid your building was under construction. So I missed seeing your three works, the three major works you presented. Respect the Seville building, as I look at it, I realize that in some ways the architectural design of the space, of the building itself, that is to say, what's behind the roof. The roof and the structure, hold themselves together in a spectacular way. But I'm not so sure the architects, including myself, responded to the lacy and crenulated and very rich texture of the arcade properly. My first reaction now would be that our building would have to have been a lot more discreet. Those staircases, for example, were clearly intrusive. I mean, in retrospect, when architects always do that, don't mind me too much. But the fact is that there were elements that would, interfere with the perception, the visual perception of a very, airy and lacy type of texture for that screen-like facade that we design all together, which is brilliant. Anyway, so much for that. I don't want to take more time. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you very much for the reminiscence.
Yeah, and we moved pretty quick, right? So we were design and build, and from initial design to final build was maybe 2.5 years.
Yeah, 2.5 years. Yes. Yes.
Bruce, I only have a few minutes left, but I'm more curious about how it was to work collaboratively with these architects, because it seems from what you've been saying, your sketches show an incredible design thinking from the structural engineer standpoint. But what information did you get from the architects to lead you down that path?
Yeah, Rick. It's always different, and just like our experience at UC Davis for the Performing Arts Center, where you got the glass wall and the canopy roof, and it's just, I think it's always different, but in many cases, I'm given opportunities to come up with ideas, right? And I think Peter was really a genius at this. Like he would tend to present 3 ideas, and he would strategically present them to try to lead the architect to select the one that he liked most. And I think people were coming to Peter for ideas. I would say probably most architects, I get involved in projects, they're not really looking for my ideas, they're looking for me to engineer it. And so in that case, I can sketch as much as I want. I can try to elbow in to add ideas and have some influence. But there are other collaborations that are very rich, and that the interplay it's really hard to figure out whose idea is what, because they come from a rich collaboration. I hope I kind of answered that question. I wanted to give Pierre a chance, Pierre Alexandre a chance to maybe add something to what I was saying about Peter and his unique genius.
Yes, something that might be good is, how old were you when you worked with Peter?
Yeah, it was 92, so it was 1988, so I was 24.
And it's so what I think it's something very special is that the way Peter worked with young engineers, and the way he always wanted to be discovering things and not necessarily to repeat what one should be doing, and the way he was. I was the same age, but we were very, very young at the time, and I think it's part of what Peter was looking to achieve, to have enough flexible engineer, enough flexible engineer to be open-minded and to be discovering all the time. And I think this is one of the challenges that engineers and designer in general have throughout the time, is how can you stay young getting older. And I think this is one of the biggest challenge that we face, because we always evaluate risk, and we tend to fall back on what we have done before. And so I think if you look at most of the people Peter worked with, they were pretty young, I think.
Yeah. And Enrique, did you have your hand up?
Sorry?
Enrique Norton, did you want to add something? I saw that, I think you had your hand up. While I wait for that, Pierre, I think, can you see my screen, the inverted pyramid?
Bruce?
Yes, Enrique.
Bruce? Yeah, I don't have a question. I just wanted to tell you and everybody to hear that it's such an honor and a pleasure working with you. And I thank you for your support in our projects.
Thank you, Enrique. And it's, maybe goes back to Rick's comment as well, is when we get the right engineer and architect collaboration and relationship and friendship, it's just such a joy. I mean, there's a beautiful quote from Eladio Dieste, who is a very religious man, master builder who talks about, the joy of designing construction, and that when you get it right, the sort of beauty that it makes you feel that your flesh is part of faraway stars. It's such a fundamental human existence kind of thing that you can tap into that. And that we really should be able to find that joy in our work.
Correct. So thank you very much, Bruce.
Thanks, Enrique. And Alex, the point you make, it's like, that Peter really loved having these young people around them because they didn't have preconceived notions of how things get built. But I think also, like, he liked having the young people that they didn't feel a strong sense of authorship and ownership as well. So it could be more of a community. And I think we're at our best when we're joined up and creative, and there isn't a single author. But I see there were some more hands. Dan, can we go a few more minutes?
Of course, yes, sure. It was a pleasure, your presentation, and I feel honored that you did it. Thank you.
So anyone else that would like to contribute to the discussion about what are we going to do going forward to influence the next generation of creative thinkers?
Bruce?
I would like to say something. Maybe Le Corbusier had a strange statement. He said, "I love engineers and I love painters, but I don't love architects." What do you make of this? Why do you think Le Corbusier loved engineers and painters, but not so much architects? And in fact, in this, he met, so to speak, Frank Lloyd Wright, who said, "Nothing wrong with architecture except the architects."
Yeah. I'm not sure. There was another. Let me try to think about that one. I think we all come in different shapes and sizes, and maybe Corbu wasn't the greatest guy. I don't know. I didn't work with him. maybe he felt like he was the one and only architect. I saw there were some other contributors. Other people.
Bruce?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, is that David?
No, it's Jeff Goldberg.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
How are you?
Thanks. Great. I was just thinking of you when I was putting this together. I was looking at our collaboration because we talked about this paper back in 2018.
Yes. I don't know about you. We've been a little dormant on that, and I apologize, but I'm glad to join this. And I just wanted to offer a couple of tidbits on the architect-engineer coordination, if you don't mind.
Well, please.
I had the chance, as Bruce knows, to grow up around this, but have studied over the years a number of structural engineers and their work with architects, thinking of people like Hans Carl Bendel or Frank Kornacker here in Chicago, or a guy named Peter Lowe, who some of you who knew old-time Arup might be familiar with, who was involved with Sydney back in the early 60s. And in each of these cases, and Peter Rice, of course, and Bill Baker, each of these have slightly different versions of how they interface with the architect. And I think that the one thing that we might possibly put on the table, if you don't mind in a thought, is that the relationship between architects and engineers has not really been critically studied. There's a lot of storytelling that goes back and forth about this collaboration or that, but it might be for the next generation to put that actually under a critical microscope and get some, ways of either measuring or understanding it in detail. Too often people who look at it are historians who really don't know what happened in the trenches. And it's left to memories and whatnot. And I just think there may be some way to get some criteria on this. If you look at, for example, the Peter Rice contributions, he's in there, messing around with systems and forms that maybe his architect never anticipated when they first walked in the door to talk to him, but are delighted afterwards. That's a very different way than someone like Frank Kornacker, who worked with Mies very carefully in a very particular kind of way that was much more sort of below the radar, if you will. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think it's, ultimately, it's what we want to explore is how to bring up the next generation to collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
I want to really focus on structural engineering and creativity. It's impossible to do without that architect-engineer relationship, but I would make the statement that maybe engineers are hedgehogs and architects are foxes. And I don't want to bookend it, so I want to keep it loose. And I think Peter Rice was a fox. I think I'm more of a fox than a hedgehog.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think engineering hedgehogs don't create space for the foxes in their organizations in the process.
So is the issue then how does an engineering fox survive in the hedgehog environment?
And how do we raise more foxes and less hedgehogs?
Excellent.
Craig, were you gonna? I saw your video.
Yes, I just wanted to throw out a response to a book that I've really enjoyed about the relationship between architects and engineers, and it goes through very old history on this, through discussing some modern structures. And that's the book Architect and Engineer by Andrew Saint, published by Yale a few years back. I found it a very illuminating read. I just want to put that out. Again, Architects and Engineers, Architect and Engineer, Andrew Saint, S-A-I-N-T is the author. That's all, just wanted to mention that.
Thanks, Craig. There's another book, isn't there? It's like Architect and Engineer, Sibling Rivalry.
A study in sibling rivalry. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
If you allow me, I would like to say something. When I visited San Lorenzo in Florence, the great building by Brunelleschi, there was a man at the door, sitting on a chair, kind of, almost a doorkeeper, so to speak. And he looked like a very interesting man. And I asked him, do you know where a certain building by Alberti was in Florence? And he said, aha, you are looking for the first architect and you turn your back on the last carpenter. The last so-called last carpenter being Brunelleschi. And I think after the Renaissance, the two split. You had a so-called architect and you had a so-called engineer, divorced. But until the Renaissance, Brunelleschi himself was an artist and an engineer. And I think that kind of oneness epitomized by him and by the builders of the great cathedrals until the Renaissance perhaps should be renewed, because this separation between the architect and the engineer is probably sometimes simplistic, and it doesn't tell the truth about the warmth sometimes that the engineer brings to the work that they are supposed to accomplish together. So I think the modern separation between engineer and architect could be questioned a little bit, and maybe reflect more on the situation before the Renaissance.
Yeah, I would. My take on that is that when the structures are unconventional, that the architect and engineer collaboration is a master builder collaboration, and hopefully with the builder as well. It's AEC, architect, engineer, constructor, contractor. I wanted to share something I heard that when Candela showed up in Mexico, there were no shell structures. And then after Candela left Mexico, there were no new shell structures being built. So there's a bit of a personality that it's kind of maybe celebrity or the charisma to make these things happen that certain people have. You know, Torolfa, Candela, Calatrava, Peter Rice, Buckminster Fuller. There's a long list. You know, Kawaguchi, and you know, I think just wanted to add to that. You know, just to share one more thought is that my presentation and my ideas are very Western focused. It's a language barrier. So it's not only is there sort of the hedgehog and the fox, there's also the West and the East that could be better aligned. Should we just take a couple more minutes if anyone else wants to share?
Of course, sure.
I saw Dan. I saw some raised hands.
Very good.
Hi, Bruce. Kais here. Great presentation. Thank you for it. One thought I wanted to throw in there is I think we're seeing more recently in engineering offices, architects actually working in engineering, and I'm one of those. You know, I'm in a company that's 85 years old, and I was probably one of the first architects to be part of that, and I think we're seeing much more of that, and it's an interesting role as architects can kind of interact with the client and have a good understanding from architects what they want to achieve, but at the same time know at the back of their head how engineering offices work. And I'd be interested in your thoughts on that kind of trend that's probably only been happening for maybe 10, 15, or 20 years.
I'm sorry, Kais. I was kind of, so the question is about architects, and can you just summarize the question?
Yeah, architects working in engineering offices.
Yeah, I think it's if they're not, it's a bit of a shame, because you know you want all these physical models and you want making to happen in your process, and architects get that and do that. Engineers, you know, if you go into an engineering office, you tend not to see a lot of that. And I would like to see a lot more. So, and then, you know, architects in engineering offices, from my experience, tend to be more related to building enclosure and facades. And they tend to also spend a lot of time doing sort of visualizations and 3D modeling. I don't know if that was a good response.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Bruce, this is Ed. Hey, great presentation.
Oh, Chris, man.
Yeah, how you doing, man?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. I'm wondering, you talk about the evolving role of the structural engineer from communicator to moderator. I'm wondering if it's as fundamental as education system for engineers, not I guess having a lot of courses on communications and presentations and speech and that kind of things. Just as basic as that is just not having the tools out of school, so you develop a comfort. I mean, architects, when they're in school, they have to present their designs in front of people regularly, but the typical engineering programs don't require that. So I'm wondering if there's some sort of change that we should be pushing for as a profession in the education system.
Yeah, I believe so very much, but I would also say as practitioners is, and I think Alex, you know, here you brought up that point that Peter, you know, we were very young working with Peter, and we were going to meetings. I remember chasing Peter to tube station when he was traveling, and I just needed to get another minute with him. And I was about to go to Madrid to meet with the local engineers for the foundations, and I had screwed something up, and I didn't know what it was. And I said, Peter, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And he goes, don't worry about it. I got your back. If anything, if you screw up, I'll be there. I'll support you. So just do your best, and I trust you. He said something like, I have ultimate faith in you, which was like, it was a beautiful thing to hear from him. Alistair Hughes, I see you on the call. Delighted to see you. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, Bruce, and thank you very much for that. I'm only sorry I missed the first 25 minutes of it, so I really didn't feel I ought to think I could contribute anything. Well,
I'm just wondering if there's anything you could say about Peter and his style.
Well, two reminiscences about Peter I can think of. One of them is that there was always a constant stream of visitors to his office. It was very, very difficult for us who were supposed to be permanently there to look in compared to all the architects and would-be architects who were, as it were, pilgrims to his door. And I felt that sometimes that the only way you could really get to know Peter was when you were out of the country together, when you actually had a bit of time. And the other thing I would say, just as a reminiscence about the way he operated, was that although he was more than the equal of the architects he was collaborating in most cases, certainly second and not second to them, he was actually quite humble in the way he approached them, and he had to be. It was there was definitely a pecking order, and the architect was in charge of the job, and that's why, as was it you or somebody else who said that he always had to produce two schemes for the architect to choose. He was the creative one in the collaboration, but he had to choose at least two schemes so that the architect at least had the say in which one was chosen. That was part of the architect's authorship that couldn't be taken away from the great, man as usually was, but the great architect. So those two reminiscences from me about the way Peter operated might be shared around.
Thanks, Alistair. I'm just delighted to see you. And I want to add a bit to that. Is I feel very much that as engineers, we're supporting architects. We're not the stars, they are. And I remember Peter looked at me just as I was leaving for Seville to go live there and be on site. And he said, when you get there, people are going to treat you like a star. But just remember, you're not.
Well, very true indeed. And one of the great things about working away from home in other countries is that you have been chosen for a special reason, and they do sort of regard you as the experts from overseas. And sometimes it's you wonder whether you deserve it or not. But you get listened to in a way that you don't when it's just somebody down the road that you're talking to.
Yeah, I had a client recently refer to our team in LA as the VIP engineers.
Well, that's nice to know. And
we had to produce the value proposition. Though, tell them why.
Yeah. What I would hope, Bruce, is that you could deliver another talk that would bring people like me up to date with what you've been doing in the last 20 years. I'm sure there's plenty.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, when you put in your qualifications, it says, don't show me anything that's more than 10 years old. Am I just beating an old horse? Were these my rock star years? Or, I was in the shadow of rock stars, and now I'm kind of out to pasture. But, there are plenty of things to talk about. And it's up to me to, there's this expression that success comes before work only in the dictionary, right? And so, it's hard work, and it's frustrating work trying to come up with these with something that's fascinating on a blank piece of paper staring at you. And it's a step process too. As you create something, and then you create something from what you created, and you create something, and how do you allow the space for something to evolve? And not just give me a solution, give it to me now. okay, you can have a day or two. Well, that's really not enough time.
It's very difficult, isn't it?
And then
sorry.
Peter was blessed with these amazing clients, right?
Yeah, well, they came to him, the sort of mutual attraction to it. Whereas for most of us, it's a matter of, at best, just trying to produce a high level of the ordinary.
If you allow me, I have a suggestion, because there are some part of the audience are engineers, and I would like to invite you, because I think it's very, very, very important to bring to the light the one in the shadow, if I can say so, because I actually am against the ideology that promotes the architect as the star, when in fact very valuable creative forces are kind of hidden in the darkness. So what I intend to do, and I have already PowerPoint presentations about Nervi, Pierluigi Nervi, about Roja. I want to start a series of gatherings, and I would be very happy if you would consider joining us to present the works of great engineers, because I think the great engineers deserve more, and often the so-called brightness of the architect tends to be, if I'm not too subjective, maybe a little bit superficial. So I think the seriousness of the engineer, towards which actually Le Corbusier pointed when he said, I love the engineers and I love the painters, but I don't love the architects, is I think the engineer as the painter, they have the seriousness of their craft, which is something to admire. So
I think that's an easy thing to do, and we could talk about that, like putting together a series of talks.
And also, by the way, Bruce, by the way of Pierluigi Nervi, the most beautiful history of architecture that I know of was actually edited and promoted, and maybe even paid for to an extent, by Nervi. He was those 18 volumes of the world history of architecture. This was the initiative of an engineer, not of an architect. So an engineer was more culturally. Pardon?
Master builder. Dan, I wanted to say hi to Mitz from Tokyo, late at night there. Mitz, can you say hi?
Hi, Bruce. Great talk. I'm sitting next to my 9-year-old daughter who is sleeping, so I cannot talk too loud and too long, but great to hear an engineer, a colleague, talk about design and philosophy. And I wish more younger people are listening to this series. And I think, students should be also listening to the talk like this. And but I was very happy to hear about your experience and some of your old colleagues who have worked with Peter, and that age. I came a little bit late after that. I missed that. I joined Arup in '96, but I totally admire that sort of golden age in a way that you guys have sort of worked together. So fantastic to listen to all the discussions and the projects you presented. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mitz. And I think it would be wonderful for us to talk about maybe sharing some of the work that you've done, some of the beautiful, amazing work that you've done. And I just want to talk a little bit about this platform. I mean, this is new, being able to plan a talk on a Friday, give it on a Monday, and have Tokyo and Jerusalem and Barcelona and Paris and New York and Florida and London, and I could keep going, Romania and Canada, just have this, everybody come together like this. This is amazing. This is a new way of communicating. And maybe this is a way for us that could help us tackle some of these more ephemeral things that we want to bring into the AEC industry. And you know, of course, I just want to bring it back to structural engineering. Like I want to focus. Yeah, and the architects get it. You know, it's like you go to an architecture school and they've been playing with robots for a decade. You go to an engineering school and they're learning about, you know, indeterminate structures and moment distribution and how to combine a matrixing. You know, stuff they were doing, you know, 30, 40 years ago. Not that it's not important, but why aren't they playing with robots? Does anybody else want to contribute?
Craig Huntington here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just to backtrack, a comment in response to the question of how, I'll speak from my own experience here. Originally studying architecture at Cal Berkeley, getting a degree there, and then going on in grad school in structural engineering. What's been odd is I've gone through my career, I've collected licenses in a number of states to suit various projects. There are some states in which, as a person without a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, albeit with a graduate degree in one, I cannot get licensed. That's just a real simple practical thing that I think ought to be addressed. I feel I missed out on, you know, some classes on materials, some classes quite far from my practice as a structural engineer that I might have taken as a civil undergrad. I'm doing fine without those, but I think the skills of communication and drafting and in understanding the thinking of architects that I gained through the undergraduate work in architecture have suited me well, and our licensing laws ought to reflect that. That's a real simple thing that can be done. That's all. I just wanted to mention that.
And Jim Dalloway, are you still on the line? Maybe we lost Jim. I'm so delighted that you all could join me. I look to catch up with all of you individually as well. If you want, send me an email. It's bruce.danziger@arup.com, and I can share with you the paper that I wrote 2 years ago about this subject. And it's time for a refresh and what we can do next. And please share any thoughts with me. I really am delighted to see all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Dan, do you want to make any final comments?
Well, again, thank you very much. I think the people who attended your presentation enjoyed it, and it was an honor to have this. I imagine, I do not know, unfortunately, these probably brilliant engineers and people. You see, there are very interesting people all over the world that we do not know of. So what I would like to invite everybody who is now here on Zoom, if they have a suggestion for any kind of discussion, talk, presentation, let's do it. Because I do think this digital agora, this Zoom platform, without transforming it into a fetish, it does have potential for bringing us together. And I think Bruce commented on this. And I think now that we are forced into this social distancing by the pandemic, maybe there is a time to reflect on our lives and on what architecture is, what engineering is, what building is. So there is something also positive in this difficult time. And so again, I address an invitation to anyone present here to come forward with any kind of idea, any kind of proposal. I'm laughing, I'm smiling and laughing at the same time at the words Bruce used. You know, the engineer, when the engineer gets wild. I think we need that wildness of the engineer. We need his imagination. He's yes, even getting wild. Yes, I encourage that. And by the way of that, you are I don't know if you have time now. I specialize in a way in paying homage to important moments in culture. And this very day, there are 8 years since a very important Austrian architect died, Günther Domenic. He's not so well known as he deserves, but I think he was one of the very important architects of Europe. So he died 8 years ago. And when Bruce will end his presentation, I will start. I have a PowerPoint presentation on Günther Domenic as a commemorative gesture towards his life and work. But for the moment, still Bruce has the microphone.
Thanks, Dan. And I do need to sign off. I guess I think tomorrow's Peter Rice's birthday. Is it June 16th?
Do you want to do it tomorrow on Peter Rice? Can you prepare a material on Rice by tomorrow?
Let's talk. I think I might need a couple more days. I sweated this one a little bit, right, over the weekend.
It's a way to avoid the middle life crisis, which keeps repeating itself. All my life, I was in a middle life crisis, actually.
Thanks so much. It's just so wonderful to see all of your beautiful faces. Thank you for joining me. And please send me an email if you're interested in the paper. And let's get in contact. Let's do a Zoom. Let's stay connected. And Dan, thank you so much for this platform.
No, we thank you, Bruce. It was
Let's talk soon.
Of you.
I've got to go. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye. So, but can I, hello? Can I use now the screen myself? I mean, am I still, you know?
You're the host, you should be able to take it back.
But how? Because he's supposed to send it back to me now.
I'm going to assign it to you. What's your name on this one, Dan?
My name is that embarrassing D, which I have to change. I don't like it. Yes, that. So did he do it?
Yes, I think so. He just left, I think.
Okay, so let me see if I can start. Do you see Günther Domenic?
No, you need to press share screen on the bottom, I guess.
Okay, so that was not, okay, so I have to press share screen. Okay, okay, I know now what to do. Thank you. Let's see, share. No. Do you see now? Do you see the
yes.
PowerPoint? Okay, you see it. So I'll begin with a slideshow. Sorry. Initially, I did a presentation for both architects, Wolf Prix and Günther Domenic, when I talked about the Rebel Vienna, but now I will just talk about Günther Domenic. Okay, from current slide. Okay, so he died exactly 8 years ago. He was 77 years old. He's not well known, but I truly think he deserves to be very well known because he was an exceptional architect, and he was an architect who was more introverted. And although his architecture is kind of extroverted in an times almost aggressive way, a very interesting architect. And I think you'll agree with me after you see his work. Okay. So he died in 2012 on the 15th of June. This is the man. He was not, you know, a star, but his work deserves a glittering reception. He was a deconstructivist before the deconstructivist, but he was also an expressionist. Here you can see him on the left is Ricardo Bofill, on the right him, and I do not know who is in the middle, unfortunately, probably someone even more famous than the two on the sides. Anyway, this is him again. He didn't build too much, but what he did, he built brilliantly, and his drawings are also magnificent. He worked for many years on his own house, which you are going to see, but he built other buildings. So Günther Dominique. Okay, you'll see some drawings now by him. He drew manually. He had a very sensitive drawing, both with colors and in black and white. He was a thinker, but he was also an artist. He didn't copy the the postmodern ways of so-called assuming the history. He was a creator, an original creator, and a very sensitive one. And you will see some relationship between his drawings and, almost an artistic relationship between the drawings, the spirit of the drawings and the spirit of his buildings. In fact, his buildings are a little more almost aggressive than his drawings. This is a building we are going to see in great detail, the Z Bank in Vienna. So he was interested in a sort of an organic architecture, but a very special, pardon? Somebody? Anyway, so some drawings of Günther Dominique. And by the way, I don't want to forget, tomorrow I will give a talk on Charles Correa, the great Indian architect. It will be his birthday, and I think it's important to study, to witness the work of other people besides Europe or the United States, or Far Eastern countries like Japan. There is greatness in many parts of the world, including in a humble, modest, anonymous village in Africa, like in Mali, the Dogon culture, which is beautiful. Anyway, this is his own house. He labored for many years at this house. If you can imagine, it is an explosion, an implosion. It is a crystallization because it was built of a tormented inner life, I would say. I could easily place his work, and in fact I did, in a series of presentations under the title Architecture and Conflict, because there is conflict here, obviously, as there is conflict in many deconstructivist works. But this was so-called deconstructivism before deconstructivism, and in a way is a little more than just deconstruction. There is conflict, and this is conflict within himself that I actually identify with to an extent. Anyway, now you'll see the bank, the Z Bank, the famous Z Bank that became infamous because this building, paradoxically and almost unexplainably, was left by the administration of the city of Vienna in the hands of Icarch people. I'm surprised that the building is still up, because the last time I saw it 2 years ago, it was people were demolishing the interior, which is very, very valuable for architecture. I hope they didn't ruin it. They were transforming it from a luggage store into a hotel, a kind of a mini hotel. But even the luggage store was a disgrace, considering the architectural complexity of the building. So initially he designed a bank, then the bank became, well, from what I know, a luggage store, and then now it is transformed into a hotel. This is the building seen from the outside. It is a building. It is a kind of a squeezed in a little fortress. But the importance of the work is more discernible at the interior. But even at the exterior, if you compare the building on the left and the building on the right with the building in the center, you realize that here we are dealing with a rebel architect. And he was a rebel architect. I think in his case, the expression in French, épater la bourgeoisie, annoy or surprise or disturb the bourgeois, would apply very well. Surprisingly, this man built a bank that paid for his extravaganza, and you'll see what we are talking about. Of course, unfortunately, you also see the luggage at the bottom. These are pictures that I took at the time when it was a luggage store. Now, can you imagine in a bank, such a so-called detail is actually a huge hand holding a fragment of the building. This viscerality, this visceral architecture, I'm very surprised that the bank invested in something like this, and I'm very happy that they did. So this was built in the early 70s, so 50 years ago. This man had the idea to show the viscera of maybe not just the physiological or physical intestines, but also the psychological ones. They are so old, these pieces of luggage in that space, but they rented the building. Or I was one of the last people who actually were able to see the inside, because they were increasingly sabotaging the access into the building. I imagine tired by many architects and students in architecture trying to visit it, and no one buying a piece of luggage. So this was done by Günther Dominique. You'll see other works by him, but I think this one is the most so-called outrageous. I wonder what he thought, what he felt when he did this building. And I wonder even more, what did the bankers think? I actually, although I'm not a great admirer of banks and bankers, in this case, I do admire them, because I think they show some openness of mind, maybe more than just some. And in a way, they are equally the creators. They contributed to this building being done. There are all kinds of details here, which are, details. There are, maybe the word is not appropriate, some Gothic, almost Gothic, architectural elements here, which are mysterious and almost unexplainable, in the second half of the 20th century. And this meeting between the heaviness of the, stone, concrete, and the technological intestines, or how to call them, these wires, this cable, these pipes. But at the same time, you would have said, well, this picture was taken in a Gothic cathedral or in some kind of Gothic building. No, it's in the luggage store in Vienna, built by, he didn't build it as a luggage store, but that's what it became. And now it's a hotel. This is the interest. This is I mean, the canopy above the entrance. You can still see the annoying backpack, you know, hanging from there. But look at the richness and the complexity of the canopy. I only regret I don't have enough pictures. And then also the floor, the pavement at the entrance of the building itself is kind of you know, tormented and tormenting. It is an artistic creation. It is a design that is not based on a Cartesian system. I love this picture. I do. If anyone would have told me this is a bank, I would have said, come on, please. Give me a break. It cannot be a bank, but it was a bank. It was designed to be a bank. I truly have the highest admiration for such a so-called client or beneficiary who pays for something like this. I'll easily take my hat off from my head if I had one on my head. I don't. Anyway, some drawings of details, so lyrical, you know, you wouldn't really expect someone who drew in this way, very delicate drawings, to build in that way. This is a sketch section through the building. He designed everything. So I actually think Günter Dominique had a medieval spirit. And that's why I mentioned in relation with Bruce's presentation that maybe we should go back to that that kind of architect that Brunelleschi epitomized. You know, the so-called last carpenter. You know, I have the highest admiration for Alberti, the so-called first architect, but there are also other paradigms possible. And one is this one by Brunelleschi, where the architect is also a master builder and very interested in the construction. So he's halfway between the engineer and the architect, or better said, he's both an engineer and an architect. He's the master builder. Well, here you have an artist, but you saw, you know, he drew even the smallest details, constructive elements. The facade is a mask, but it's a mask. Maybe it's you know, refers to one of the animals, the two animals mentioned by Bruce, and it's not the fox, it's the other one, the hedgehog. Yes, maybe he himself was Bruce, not Bruce. Maybe Bruce too. I'll talk with him about it. But I'm talking about Günter Dominique. Now, when I last visited it last year or 2 years ago, there was a man there who, you know, heard us talking with the students, and he invited us in because he knew the language we were talking in. And he told us this architect, meaning Günter Dominique, makes us totally crazy because we have to handle very carefully what he built here. But it's so unusual. He actually said, this man probably smoked something, meaning, you know, drugs, or when he did the design. He didn't imagine that an architect could be so off the grid as Günter Dominique was. And I wonder, why shouldn't we bring back the sculpture into architecture? Even in this so-called iconoclastic way, why not? It would enrich our buildings, I think. Even here, you can see the craftsman. You know, the facade is, you know, metallic, is you would say cold, but you cannot avoid thinking about the craftsmanship, the detail. Everything is designed and it has a certain character. There he is. That's Günther Dominique. The problem with such dramatic interiors, and it's a problem to be encountered in many deconstructivist works, is that it doesn't matter how dramatic the interior, how dramatic the structure, how deconstructed, the so-called bourgeois way of life, but the word bourgeois is not quite appropriate, is betrayed by the stair, because the stair is still kind of common. I mean, yes, you play a little bit with the parapets, with the, you know, the staircase, but the stair in itself, you still have to respect, or do you? Maybe the stairs is too quiet and too repetitive and too predictable. Maybe we could even imagine some uncomfortable stairs that would make Neufeld get totally crazy wherever he is now. Now, we'll take a look at his own house, at which he labored for many years, and he didn't finish it when he died. It's an explosion of, you know, volumes and surfaces. We saw the drawings. Now you see the building. Maybe for some, including me, the house is a little bit too, you know, too cold and too. It doesn't bother me the clashing of the volumes and the surfaces, but the materiality, the tactile, the tectonics of the building for a house, for me, are a little bit problematic. Maybe if it was, I don't know, a museum or some kind of a public building, but a private house, maybe, but maybe it's the bourgeois in me that makes this statement now, that a house perhaps needs a little bit of intimacy, of warmth. Yeah, it's very possible. Yes, it's the bourgeois within me that makes the statement. I don't know. Anyway, it's a big house, and now it's a foundation there or a museum. So it became a public building. In this case, he was also the client. He was the inhabitant. When I presented this work 1 or 2 years ago, somebody told me that I think, if I recall well, a relative of Dominique, of Günther Dominique, actually got hurt, fell somewhere in the house, or maybe even lost his life. I don't recall very well. But the house, yes, could be dangerous. Sorry, this is, I just wanted to show, well, this is what Frank Gehry did in Bilbao, but Günther Dominique did, you know, something maybe at a certain level, not very different, but 20 years earlier, in a more angular, you know, way, of course, without the fluidities that Frank Gehry has and had. You can, if you are interested to study further his work, there are plenty of images and text, critical text as well on the web. This is how it looks like from the top. It's funny to compare this building with a pastoral bucolic house on the right, to realize what a difference, what a conflict. It is a big house, no doubt. That's why I thought perhaps the building deserves, and it does have now, a public function. But you see two different worlds here. You see this house, and then you see his building. And this building, his building says, you know, to hell with a so-called normal life. I am going to assert the truth of my inner life, which is tumultuous, which is exalted, which is anxious. And that's exactly how his building is. have an initial sketch, then the plan, if we could call it so, but we could call it so. It's interesting that a plan usually refers to a drawing that is bidimensional, but here you are not sure, is it bidimensional? Not really, it's something between a plan, a perspective, an axonometric drawing is, and it is its quality that it actually erases the barriers or the frontiers between bidimensionality and three-dimensionality, and maybe we can add one more dimension, if not several. Again, you know, I admire the interior, but again, when I see the staircase, the stairs could have been in a quieter building, just as they are. So there seems to be a contradiction here between two systems of thinking and two systems of doing architecture. And I wonder why we cannot sabotage the predictability of the stair either. Yes, with all the risks involved that they might become very uncomfortable. But once you assume a way of doing architecture based kind of on Friedrich Nietzsche's appeal to us, live dangerously, then why keep the stairs so predictably, you know, so-called comfortable? This is a model, one of the models he built for the house. Bruce talked about the engineer getting wild. Here we have the architect getting wild in the sense that he was also the client, so he had complete freedom to do whatever he wanted to do. Sometimes this complete freedom maybe is not so good, you know, because moving beyond a certain limit of, you know, the edge of wildness could be problematic, maybe sometimes. But again, it makes me smile. You know, look at this house and look at this one. They are not too far away from each other. It just crossed my mind that maybe this one was his too. Probably not, but I don't know. Seems to be part of the same property almost. Can you imagine a man doing this and also being the owner of this building? And this makes me think of Sir Norman Foster, who builds the way he builds, as you know, very technologically, but he purchased a very large building in the United States, in Martha's Vineyard, or how it is called, where the Obamas are used to rent some space, which is almost the opposite of the architecture he does. So maybe Günther Dominique, I don't know. I like to think that I'm totally wrong. But it is amusing to see this house and then this one not far away from it. Well, there are interesting things happening here. It's not just the building, but the outdoors as well. Austria is very nice, and actually I thought of doing this, but I forgot. I wanted to show before the work of Günther Dominique, the work of an artist, an Austrian artist who is now 81 or 82, Hermann Nitsch, because it is fascinating, this dichotomy, this tension that the Austrians seem to have. On one hand, they have, you know, the little house that we just saw, the pastoral bucolic side, but then they also have the avant-garde, if we could call him so, the avant-garde architect or the avant-garde artist. And when they do get so-called wild, they do very much so, very convincingly. So it's not at all an accident, I think, that psychoanalysis was born in Vienna. because there is conflict, obviously. Now it is a public building and it deserves to be a public building. Now another building, an administration building, completed in 1995. Even here you see this longing for almost negating the, even the necessity of the building. It is as if architecture wants to get out of its own skin and search for something else outside of itself. Of course, the functionalist would say, well, what is this? What is the need for this? Well, it has an emotional and symbolic, perhaps, need. It's not just the physiological one, so to speak. Now you'll see a space for nuns, which is, I think, a surprising building. Seeing it after we saw the other two, it's a very good building, I think, and it is an organic architecture that surprises you. It's very well done, and it seems the nuns enjoy it. It's a cave. It's a cave. It's the interior of maybe Jonas Well. I don't know. It's an inspiring interior and it is an inspiring exterior. Look at the buildings outside of it. So this is Günther Dominique surprising us because this building is different from the one that we saw previously. During construction, it's very well crafted. Okay, now we will see a building that he did an intervention within a structure built by the Nazis. It was a big gathering place for the Nazis in Nuremberg, and Günther Dominique did an intervention on the ruins of that huge building that the Nazis built before the war, and it is symbolically an interesting intervention. I found this phrasing: injection in a Nazi ruin, or confronting the architecture of evil. In Domus, it was written. So even in its unfinished state, the Congress Hall, where his intervention took place, based on the Colosseum, is huge. The plan was to roof it and provide 50,000 indoor seats. So this was, the building where you'll see the intervention of Günther Dominique. This is a section. You see, he has this sloping circulation that crosses the whole building, and you see it in plan. It's truly almost the negation of the contemporary gesture of something that was questionable because it was associated with the Nazis. So again, Günther Domenig was and is very good at expressing an architecture of conflict, or the conflict that often architecture cannot avoid. So you see, we find this kind of wording. Domenig's response is like a guerrilla ambush, not a frontal assault, but it's still war. It is guerrilla war. And you can see it evidenced in this picture, or in this picture for that matter. It is in essence a protest against war. It is a scream in a way, an architectural scream against the horrors of a war which should not take place again. Because the structure, the old structure, is actually lying. The old structure, and we see here only a fragment, a ruin, was trying to say everything is in order, everything is under control, but it was not at all like this. It was a big lie, a tragic lie, and millions of people died because of that horror. And the intervention by Domenig is legitimate, because it tries to externalize the truth that the Nazis try to hide. And I think this is the role of a good architect, and this is the role of a good artist, to try to tell the truth, even in forms that might appear to so-called escape from reality. No, the real role of the good artist and the good architect is to tell the truth in forms that could be aesthetically outrageous, but as long as they respect the deeply felt truth, is fine. I personally think that what Günther Domenig did here is superior to what, since I mentioned him before, Sir Norman Foster did at the Reichstag. Because what Sir Norman Foster did at the Reichstag was a certain unconscious and unwanted, I imagine, complicity with the dome of the previous building. And I think this is problematic, because the dome, as he used it in Berlin, still expresses that centrality. It doesn't express sufficient opposition to what the Reichstag stood for. Here we see the opposition. Here we see the anxious architect expressing his veto to the ideology associated with the old building. Okay, now we see a few pictures with another building, this exhibitional space. Courageous, all those people being, cantilevered, heroically, but I imagine the engineers did a good job. I really think, by the way of the talk by Bruce, which was so generous, and I really am grateful to him that he gave that talk, that the man in the shadow, the engineer, deserves more attention, and we don't talk enough about them, but they actually are the ones who make the building stand. And I think they deserve more applauses from us and acknowledgement. Because yes, the architect can throw in some irresponsible graphisms, but the engineer is the one who has to make it into a building, and that is a tacit, modest form of heroism, maybe deeper. Anyway, so now we'll arrive at, I think, the last building that I show in this presentation, which is a huge building. Is maybe he was getting older and he accepted a commission that is very corporate. The T Center, it's a huge building. He kept something of that nerve, the rebelliousness of the earlier buildings, but he had to deal here with a big corporation. So this is the building. And once you visit Vienna, it's almost, it's difficult to not see it. It doesn't matter, you come by bus or car, or it's a big building. And it's still Günther Dominique, although he worked with a few other architects. Now, maybe there isn't such a big difference between the aesthetics of this building and the library built by Zaha Hadid in the very same city. You see it, it's a very large building here. And you know, the urban landscape of you know, modern Vienna, if we can call it so, seen from the big highways. And some drawings, you know, the plans and the section. Okay, this is the last image that I have for Günther Dominique at night, but the lighting changes. This is in one night, how it looked like. Anyway, if you want to say anything, or if you want to, if you have 5 or 10 more minutes, maybe I could show you now what I wanted to show actually before him, that wild artist, Hermann Nietzsche, just to show you how split, how divided the Austrian spirit is. On one hand, they could be very, you know, rational and ordered and so on and civilized, and on the other hand, they have some of the most explosive forms of non-conventionality and even bloody externalization of an inner truth that is not at all at peace with itself. If you want, I can show you in a few minutes what Hermann Nietzsche does and do. Please let me know. Hello, do you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
So do you want me to show you Hermann Nietzsche? It's a short presentation.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Let's hope I find it, because I'm a little bit. So I go to.
Maybe in the meantime, I would like to add something to your Reichstag. So, I mean, first of all, I would like to add that, of course, if Norman Foster gets a commission for a building, he's not a critic. You know, he's a person who is sort of reinforcing the status quo. You know, Norman Foster is not in any way a critical architect. I mean, you hire Norman Foster for getting things done and getting things done well and sustainably in a cost-efficient way, and to a certain degree innovative. So in that sense, comparing the two is a little bit, I think, misleading. And secondly, what is actually factually wrong, and I'm sorry to say, the continuation of after the reunification of Germany in the Reichstag is because exactly the Reichstag is not a Nazi building. The Reichstag housed the first democracy after the First World War, and Hitler hated this building. So when the Nazis came to power, the Reichstag was almost not in use. So therefore, critical, I don't know, design and understanding with the building itself is actually not required because it was never a Nazi building.
Well, thank you for your comments, your intervention. I understand, but from what I read, still associating the Reichstag with the war, with the power structure of Germany. I don't think it was, you know, it can be.
Yes, I mean, yes, it played a certain role in a way. I mean, you can say it was built for, I mean, Reichstag means empire, right? So it was built under the first emperor, and then the First World War happened. But in a way, it housed then the parliament from the Weimar Republic, which established, of course, or enabled Hitler to come into power and be elected as chancellor, as first chancellor, until he abolished democracy. However, he hated this building explicitly, exactly because of the fact so many discussions happened in this building. He found this building a turmoil, and so he, as soon as he became chancellor, he never tried to put a foot inside. So the building was used, yes, as a sort of, it burned down and sort of to push through these sort of laws of extraordinary circumstances where they can even further abolish democracy. But the building itself was not really standing for Nazi Germany. So there were other buildings which are built by the Nazis, which are representing that much, much more.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, but it was standing for the militarist Germanic Empire, the same aggressiveness and stuff. Of course, it was not Nazi, but it was still Germany.
Yeah, but okay, then you deny part of German history, for instance, after
no,
the
I
First
don't
World
deny
War.
it, but that explains what.
But there was.
No,
yeah.
You should assume history, but it was this kind of history which the building is expressing brilliantly with the help of Norman Foster.
I highly disagree, but you know, I don't see a really need for being critical. I mean, it's a transparent cupola instead of a closed one, which talks about transparency itself of a democratic process. So I don't see how this building stands with a, even if it has the name of empire, it stands with a representation of a German empire. Even though it was, let's say, we could agree it's not the Second World War because this is a fact. So we come to the First World War. So, so you say that it stands for aggressive Germany from the First World War, and that should be worked out more in the design.
But if you allow me, because you mentioned, and you were correct, that Sir Norman Foster is not a critical architect. He does the job that he's commissioned to do. But I wonder, you know, Louis Kahn said that a painter, if he wants to express his opposition to war, he can make the wheels of the war machine square, but that the architect has to make them round. And my question is, shouldn't in the case of a war, which is a tragedy, to have also the architect make the wheels of the war machine square or not make them at all. In other words, to what extent is the architect the slave of the one who commissions him? Should he accept anything? Should he just say, yes, I am just the hand that implements what I'm paid for to implement? I actually long for an architect who also has a moral stance, who says no to war, and who also at times maybe be even sarcastic or oppositional towards an ideology that he doesn't believe in, because it's a proclamation of one's freedom.
Look, I don't disagree with you on that point at all. What I was just saying is I wonder if there was even a reason for criticism, okay? So we can debate that and we can agree or disagree that the Reichstag was a symbolism for a certain imperialistic Germany and aggression. But let's maybe blend this out for a second and now go back to the complicity of Norman Foster. Yes, I agree that an architect has to make a point and an architect has to make a standpoint and should not make the wheels or whatever. But then again, do you think they would have chosen an architect who was not making the wheels? I mean, this is a competition. How does it work? I mean, they picked Foster because they want Foster and they want the design. So it is a little bit naive almost to say, why would Germany, after the reunification, choose an architect where they know he was producing some criticality? So then you should search for the blame for the German government, not to hire an architect who would do that, but they go for the most conformist architect.
Well, let's say the great German historian Ernst Nolte told us in his famous books that there was no First and Second World War. There was only one great civil European war. And in this building, the socialist majority, which was in 1914, voted for the war, giving up their ideals in front of the German nationalism. That is a historic fact. So that was the very reason for which in the Federal Republic or in West Berlin, they let it like a ruin, you know? It's more complex.
Yes, I agree on the complexity. However, me personally, I connected more to the Republic of Weimar, and it of course failed to prevent a person like Hitler coming into power. But I associated more with the democracy itself after the First World War rather than the atrocities of the war itself. And I think this is how most of the Germans see it. I mean, I understand you disagree and see it differently. Yeah.
No, thank you. Really, I think your comments are very on the point, and I personally would think further by myself about what you said. Thank you. If you want now, because really I wanted this date somehow to, besides Bruce presenting what he did, to be an homage to Günther Dominique, but by the way of the theme, of the possible theme, architecture and conflict, I thought of showing a few images of the work of this perhaps strange Austrian architect, who shows in a way what is hidden by the placidity of what I might call bucolic art, or an art that doesn't tell enough about what is happening within one's soul, if I can say so. So I don't know if you know the work of this artist. He's very famous in Austria and in artistic circles. So I'll begin the show from just a second. This keeps popping up, this thing. Okay, slideshow. And I would be curious to know what you think of it, because he's a very, you know, it's impossible not to get agitated or to it's impossible to be indifferent to his work. I mean, this is the artist at 80 or so. He's 81 or 82, and he is not afraid of the blood, figuratively and concretely. He paints. Well, he also uses some other colors, but most of the time it is red, and it is blood, and you'll see what I'm talking about very soon. Of course, there are religious overtones here. And it's interesting that he assumed religiosity or even spirituality with blood. And this is where, you know, Christianity meets the pagan. And that impossible or difficult conjunction is something that is often neglected, but not by him. There are abstractions, of course, but you can see almost, I mean, it doesn't take a great effort to imagine, you know, a possible altar or, you know, even some kind of a triptych of the Middle Ages, abstracted, of course. So he's an artist that is interested in the profane, but is also interested in the sacred in a tacit and implicit and subtle and almost you know, hidden way. After all, you see on the right side something that is explicitly religious, but on the other hand, the bloodiness of the canvases is so obvious. And now you see the this mystery theater that he envisions and enacts with lots of people. Can you imagine? I mean, this is done in that very Austria and in that very Vienna, where Adolf Loos said that the more civilized the country, the less graffitis and the less tattoos. In other words, the less blood. But the truth is, in Vienna, there are plenty of tattoo shops, and there are also plenty of graffitis. The ornament didn't go away, nor did the blood. And the tension between whiteness and redness can be also commented upon in relation with Hitler, because Hitler envisioned white cities, splendid cities with the help of his architects. But the very same man had no problem at all to generate lots of deaths, to provoke them with a lot of blood flew that could have been avoided. And so isn't it strange? Or maybe it's not strange. Psychologically, it's not strange. It is even known in the compulsive cleaning disorder, where you have someone cleaning excessively and obsessively the sink or the dishes, and that's because they don't reflect upon the inner disorder. And I think the inner disorder of the Second World War was hidden by the whiteness of the grosse Halle, or the whiteness of the big stadiums, the whiteness of the architecture they wanted to build, but they neglected the bloody truth that Nietzsche is externalizing. I mean, look, this is done by a contemporary artist, and I think he wants to externalize, to make obvious something that we neglect. Maybe you could say the beast within, the blood within, the turmoil within. I mean, it's very easy, you know. I'm thinking of the white architecture that obsessed from Richard Meier to, I don't know, so many minimalists today. We know we make white boxes, white cubes. Everything is white, but we forget the drama of human life. We forget the tensions. I understand what Luis Barragan said, that, you know, a good architecture is one that, you know, is bringing you peace and harmony and so on. but maybe equally justified is Peter Eisenman, who on the other hand said quite the opposite. A good architecture is one that provokes you and makes you even uncomfortable. Anyway, we do need the artists, I think, to bring out the hidden, the unspoken of, because these conflicts, they do exist. I know they exist within myself, and I imagine they exist within other people as well. But this is a conflict that takes on a social dimension. He does go very far in this respect. In fact, I don't know if you can go further than him. At least Rembrandt, he depicted, a knifed cow. But here you have, it's not a painting. It's the real thing, so to speak. Why do I show these pictures? Because I think, in a way, Günther Dominique tried in his architecture to say something about this tension, this conflict within himself, and maybe even within society through some of his buildings. Hermann. If those who made the Second World War possible would have known these things, would have reflected on these things, that there is always the dialectics of whiteness and redness, between the purity of white and the so-called impurity of the red. Maybe you know that in alchemy, in European alchemy, there are three phases. The first one is was nigredo, the blackening. Then you had the whitening, meaning albedo, and then you had the last one, rubedo, the reddening. And that you start with negation, with blackening, and then you go the opposite with antithesis, the whiteness. But in the end, you have to bring back life into the purity of the white. And for that, you need the red, you need the blood, you need life. It cannot be just a white, white pure thing. And by the way of this is, I think, the New York Five, who were obsessed, at least in some parts of their work at the beginning, by whiteness. I cannot forget that John Haydock, for example, and he was one of them, was fascinated by the movie The Shining with Jack Nicholson, which is a horror movie. And so there is some complicity, I think, between whiteness and some form of horror, because excessive whiteness hides something, and what it hides is what Hermann Nietzsche tries to visualize through this mystery theater or through his paintings. But even here you see the fight or the dialectics between whiteness and redness. I wonder what these people who participated in this so-called mystery theater felt when they were doing this. I don't think personally I would be able to go through something like this. It is some kind of an intoxication that I'm not capable of. Anyway, that was it. Maybe I should stop sharing. Okay. Bruce, you are still here? I mean,
yeah, I came back to say thank you.
Well, we thank you, Bruce.
1 second, baby girl.
I don't hear you. Hello. Should I do it again and encore? It was very beautiful, truly. Your participation and you brought in all these people is magnificent. Let's do one on Peter Rice. You mentioned him so eloquently, and I'm sure he deserved it, that I think he should be known. So I will take care to invite many architects to a presentation by you probably on Peter Rice. What do you think? Lengthy presentation on Peter Rice.
Yeah, why don't we do it in July, if that's okay, Dan?
In July, so far away. Okay, Bruce, sure, of course.
2 weeks.
Well, as opposed to me, you probably also have a job, so you cannot be on Zoom with these strange people all day long.
Let's do it in 3 weeks. That's okay.
Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it. I'm very
Thank
happy
you.
we met. I'm very happy we met, and I'm very happy you made this possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. So anyone here who wants to say something, or we should just say good night to each other? Please say something, otherwise I will never stop. So please don't allow me to talk, please.
Dan?
Yes.
Can you listen? Hello.
David, hi.
Hi. It was a very good presentation, both the one from Bruce and also yours following.
Thank you.
And well, for me, at least for today, it's goodbye. However, I just wanted to say that I drop you an email with potential 2 presentations whenever you can have a look to see if they are worth it or not, and let me know.
Yes, I did read it, and I apologize. I didn't reply yet to you because I was very busy with this, but I did read it.
Okay, no worries.
No, I did read it, and I agree with your proposal. So let's do it. Thank you.
Okay. So I will prepare it and let me know a suitable date for both of us.
Yes, yes, I will. We'll keep in touch. Yes.
Okay, thank you. You have my email now.
Yes, I do. Thank you, David.
That's okay. Thank you.
So Florian, when are you going to make the presentation about your own work in Indonesia?
Oh, we can do it next week, Tuesday.
Excellent.
If you want, so it would be good. Starting.
No, I do.
Okay, then let's fix the date.
Yes, let's do it.
It should be the 23rd, if I'm not wrong, right?
Yeah, 2 days before Gaudi and Alvaro Cesar. Excellent. So we'll do it on the 23rd. Yes.
Okay.
That's fine. At what time?
Yeah.
You decide the time.
I think wrote you. Let me check the email. Just a second. So you're in the located in the US, correct?
No, I'm not. But tell me the time you want. Doesn't matter. Just tell me the time you want to start this.
Wait. Let me check what I send you. I sent so many emails back and forth. I mean, for me, around 6 o'clock Indonesian time, 7 o'clock Indonesian time would be great, which is.
Florian, what time is it now in Indonesia?
It's 20 to 1.
20 to 1. Okay, so it's past midnight. Okay,
yes.
So what I suggest, we'll do it maybe 2 hours earlier, so it will be like.
Yeah, 8. I think you started.
We'll start earlier for you. We'll start earlier so you don't ruin your night because of the.
Yeah, or no, it's not only about ruining my night, but it's also getting some Indonesian audience, right?
Right.
Because it's too late for them, then it's a little bit, you know, then we cannot provide people, I think.
Of course.
So,
of course.
So I was thinking maybe 7 or 8 years.
Very good.
I will,
yes.
Yeah, I will drop you an email and then we can promote it and yeah, get the word out.
Thank you. Yes, I think it will be very interesting, and maybe you'll think about at one day to invite maybe some other Indonesian architects or prepare some kind of, you know.
I mean, Indonesian architects, we have plenty of fantastic architects in Indonesia, which are internationally completely underrepresented. So there is a very rich source of contemporary architects to be shown. So yes,
could you please coordinate this? Could you coordinate? We could even make a symposium. I mean, you know, Indonesian contemporary architecture, and you are the, you know, the catalyst and the, you know, the coordinator of this.
Yeah, let me think about it, how we do it. Either we give a presentation or we invite a couple of people. I mean, sometimes language is a little bit of a barrier, English proficiency, but I think there are a couple of guys who can speak well enough English to give a presentation. So let me think about it. Let me brainstorm with Dana. You saw her too, right? So my partner, then how we do this best.
Yes, yes.
Yeah?
Plus, you can always translate.
Yeah, no, me not. My Indonesian is not so good.
No, but your partner.
Yeah, she can. That's true. Yes.
Thank you.
Good. Then I will pack up too because it's like rather late for me and go to sleep.
Please, good night. Thank you for participating.
Yeah, thank you. And I will probably join in on Sunday on your solstice event.
Thank you. We will. We'll celebrate the solstice. Yes.
Okay, cool. See you. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye. So anyone here who wants to say something, or we'll just say goodbye to each other?
I think we can say goodbye for now. It was really nice. They were really nice lectures.
Thank you. No, and really, at first I didn't know. I mean, I met accidentally, so to speak, Bruce. I didn't know he was such a high caliber engineer. I mean, he invited, you know, maybe many of the people he invited are brilliant engineers that I do not know of. But you saw the kind of work he was involved with, you know, that incredible Sony, you know, roofing there in Berlin, and I mean, very important work. So I think we witnessed the presentation of a very important and accomplished engineer who is also very modest, and this is very beautiful. I mean, this is a man who, you know, I didn't know of 1 week ago, and he didn't know of me. But he, in some strange way, he got some emails from me. I don't even know. I know how, because he was on the faculty of SciArc in Los Angeles. So he received some messages. And again, strangely, he didn't get disturbed by them as some other people do. Quite the opposite. He was interested to start a dialogue. And here we had today this spontaneous gathering of some probably great engineers, thanks to him. So it is something miraculous about this medium, that yes, we are forced into, you know, confinement, into solitude by distancing, but at the same time, it's possible this dialogue across space and time. And I think it's beautiful. And you witnessed, people are very willing to speak out, to speak up their minds, to be open, to be sincere. And I think this is very beautiful. And so I think we should continue. And all of us could think of other ways, invite other people, maybe present your own work. It doesn't have to be, you know, so-called glamorous or acknowledged. Quite the opposite. I think we should encourage the road not taken to be taken, at least at this level. I think the medium has good potential. I mean, truly today, we had someone in Tokyo, some people in London, some in Los Angeles, some in New York, some in I don't know where. It is in a way very beautiful. And we did it without, schedules, heavy schedules or, funds or anything. It was grassroots. So I am grateful to this medium. I hope I don't become addicted to it, but because it will ruin my nights. But because anyway, I shouldn't tell you all the things I do in order to make these things happen. By the way, tomorrow, yes, tomorrow I will present Charles Correa, a very important Indian architect. Just please pray for me that I find the presentation. I had one, otherwise I have to lose all night to create a new PowerPoint presentation on him. I tried to find it today and I didn't find it. So I'm a little bit desperate because I am not very organized, and to create a new PowerPoint presentation in less than 20 hours is not so easy. But I do want to celebrate him because he deserves it. And I'll probably also present, since I will talk about Charles Correa, Doshi, who got the Pritzker Prize and who is the other brilliant Indian architects. And they need to be known, both of them, and I'm sure there are others, but we can talk about this too tomorrow if you want to join me or us. And maybe we could end with this appeal I have towards you. If you want to propose a theme for discussion or for a presentation, please do so. Because I think anyone has interesting things to say. Okay, should we say goodbye to each other? Hello?
Yes, I guess.
Okay. So if you want tomorrow to join me, I will welcome you. Until then, goodbye. And thank you for your presence today.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Goodbye. I still see there are a few more people here, and I don't want to be impolite and to end the Zoom thing before you retire. What should we do? I have to end. No one is saying anything.